The host has canceled me out.
Okay, I think it's time to start. I think we're rolling. If our metrics are correct, we have about 1,000 people participating in this very special webinar on the reversing the tax hikes of Proposition 19. My name is John Kupal. I'm the president of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Most of you have heard of our organization. We're California's largest taxpayer advocacy organization with over 200,000 members, and we were formed by Howard Jarvis to protect Proposition 13, which we've been doing for on these many 40 years now. Again, I'm glad you're with us. Our program today on reversing the tax hikes of Proposition 19 will include a presentation by our own legislative director, Scott Kaufman. And then we are also pleased to have Robert Ravinius, a good friend of ours, who is with the Family Business Association of California. He is the executive director. And then later on, around the 10:30 hour, we will have Assemblyman Kevin Kiley, who is sponsoring the proposed constitutional amendment ACA 9, which will reverse this. He is very swamped today, as you may have heard in many of the press announcements that he is making an announcement today, but he has made time to be with us around 10:30. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? I want to do a brief intro. Many of you know that last November, Proposition 19 repealed a key property tax collection that prevented intergenerational transfers between parents and grandparents and their children or grandchildren from being reassessed to full market value. Proposition 19 barely passed. It had a good element in it insofar as it allowed what we call portability, taking your Proposition 13 base with you to another county, but it also had a poison pill in it, which was this provision that we're focusing on today, and that is the essential removal of that intergenerational transfer protection. After November, our phones started ringing off the hook of people who were unaware of this particular provision of Proposition 19, and they had to scramble to change their estate plans because the effective date of Prop 19 was April 16th, and February 16th. They had a very short amount of time to make plans, and so and a lot of people did not. We have been getting calls from a lot of people who were caught unawares, and we've been getting a lot of calls from estate lawyers who their phones were ringing off the hook. There are a lot of estate lawyers who are very concerned with the damage that Proposition 19 has inflicted on their clients. As I said, California homeowners, particularly those who envision passing along their home or their income-producing property to their kids, were blindsided by this. And so our objective at this point is to seek a reversal of Proposition 19. And what we seek to do is nothing new. Californians have overwhelmingly rejected the notion of any kind of inheritance tax. In the wake of Proposition 13 in 1978, there was a proposition on the ballot in 1982, which was an outright constitutional ban of estate taxes. That kind of tells you where California voters are on this issue. And it repealed the estate tax and the gift tax as well. As I said, 4 years earlier, we had Proposition 13, which limits property taxes to 1% of value and limits increases in taxable value to 2% a year. Under the normal rules of Proposition 13, property is reassessed to full market value. But in the wake of the repeal of the inheritance tax, people began to realize that when they would pass away or they tried to transfer their property to their children or grandchildren, it would trigger reassessment. And because Proposition 13 had so effectively limited property taxes, this came as a huge sticker shock to many parents or grandparents who wanted to transfer their property to their children or grandchildren. Because of that, because of the outcry, the the voters made it clear that they wanted this changed, and the legislature agreed. The legislature in 1986 put on the ballot a proposed constitutional amendment to allow properties to be transferred from generation to generation without triggering reassessment. Interestingly enough, that proposition, Prop 58, was put on the ballot by unanimous vote of both houses of the California legislature. So that tells you that there was a lot of political movement behind this. And when it was on the ballot, it passed by voters with well over 70%. Prop 58 prevents the intergenerational property transfers from reassessment. And as I said, it's been wildly popular. This proposition has caught a lot of people unawares. I think what the nature of the calls that we're getting, and many of you have heard, is that we had no idea this is what Proposition 19 did. At the time of the November election, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association was not only engaged in the Proposition 19 fight, but we were also major players in the fight against the split roll initiative, and we were successful in defeating the split roll, which was a direct attack on Proposition 13. Unfortunately, Prop 19 did squeak by again because I don't think it got the notice that it deserved, but it's certainly getting the notice right now. So we want to provide a fix to that, and I think there is a groundswell of support for reinstating 58, and that is kind of the hallmark of this campaign, called Reinstate 58. Or another way to put it is, let's preserve Prop 13 for our children, because the reality is our children will not get the benefits of Proposition 13, at least the value of the values that the property that their parents held. So we're going to move forward on this in various ways, both at the legislative level with a proposed constitutional amendment. There's also a statutory remedy that we have proposed, but I'll let Scott talk about that in more detail. And then we'll also open it up for questions. I know there are a lot of people watching this right now. We may not be able to handle it all, but if you go to our website at hjta.org, we have a special banner at the top relating to Proposition 58. And we noticed that a lot of people are using that resource to learn more about it. So with that, I will turn it over to our legislative director, Scott Kaufman, who is our point person on the legislative fixes. Scott?
Thank you, John. My name is, for the record, my name is Scott Kaufman. I'm the legislative director at Howard Jarvis, and with me today and talking with you on this portion is also Robert Ravinius, the executive director of the Family Business Association of California. I guess I'll get it started, and I kind of like to start. I assume a lot of the folks watching this, probably most of the folks watching this, are aware of what Prop 19 is and what it did, and you're watching us because you're mad about it and you want something done. But for those who may not be, I always like to start talking about what Prop 19 did. So what was Prop 58 and 193? Well, Prop 58 said that that your children would inherit your primary residence free and clear without triggering reassessment under any circumstance, and that you could also get you could also pass on a $1 million in other property to your children. The $1 million other property could be a rental property, a vacation home, a small business. It was really kind of very open-ended. Prop 193 did is it just extended that to grandchildren in certain circumstances if the parents had died or something like that. So what did Prop 19 do? Well, Prop 19 did three things. The two that I think got a lot of conversation during the campaign, and then one that didn't. The first part was the portability. Portability is being able to move and take your Prop 13 with you. You could already do that to some extent, but it broadened it. You could do it 3 times, and you can do it to any county in California. It used to be the county had to accept the transfer, and while most in Southern California did it, a lot of the Northern California counties did not. and this required them all to accept the transfer, and you could do it up to 3 times. That's something that we've supported in the past. It's been put on the ballot before. We supported it when it was on the ballot before. We have no problem with that. The other part was setting up a wildfire fund to put money into wildfire to mitigate, the impacts of wildfires and those sorts of things. We have no issue with that. It's this middle part that really didn't get much talk, and that's what it did to Prop 58 and 193 and the intergenerational transfer. And what Prop 19 did is it took Prop 58 and just really turned it on its head. And now it says that you can only keep your Prop 13 property tax assessment if your child moves into the house and claims it as their primary residence within a year. And for a lot of people, that just doesn't make sense. Kids grow up, they move on, they get jobs in other places. I live in Sacramento now. My parents live in Oxnard. I'm not going to move back to Oxnard to inherit and move into my parents' home. That's not where my job is. And most kids move out. And so it has the real potential to just be a very sizable property tax increase on kids inheriting their family home. And the property values have skyrocketed in California since these laws were passed and since Prop 13 was passed. And it could really mean keeping the family home or not. And that's especially true of low income folks, people of color. The campaign made much ado about Jeff Bridges and rich folks where we're abusing this, but those people can afford to pay these taxes, these differences in taxes. This law really is going to hurt middle class, low income people that are using rental properties as a pathway to middle class. Home ownership and property ownership is one of the best ways to move up into the middle class. And there's a real concern here, and I think it's a valid concern, and the concern that we're hearing from people every single day, and we have heard every single day since the election in November, that people are, kids are going to be driven out of their family homes, and it's just not acceptable. I want to bring in Robert now, because I'd like him to talk a little bit about what he's seen, and especially what he's seen kind of on the family business and the business side. Robert, would you mind sharing your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, John, for having me today. As you said, I think most people were unaware of what Prop 19 really did. And I think if the advertising, et cetera, had been more forthright, Prop 19 would not have passed. But I don't think people really understood what they were voting for. So we represent family businesses at the Capitol, and that means families, and they are very concerned about the ramifications of this, and all the way to other kinds of property, farming or whatever, which is, I think, still a bit up in the air. But we're with you 100% on this, because it just hasn't been good policy, and it's very concerning to people. And families want to be able to transfer, as you said, Scott, their properties and their homes, particularly, to their children and grandchildren. So we're with you. I think we were the only 2 organizations that opposed Prop 19. And as John said, a lot of us were focused on Prop 15, which is a split roll initiative, and we were able to defeat that, fortunately. But it's time to focus on this now. So as I said before, family businesses are with you all the way.
Yeah, and I think one part that really gets lost in all of this, and you and I have talked about this previously, is this 1 million in other property. Obviously, Howard Jarvis is the kind of, we're a taxpayer organization, but we're a taxpayer organization for homeowners and property taxpayers, and we don't necessarily talk about the business side so much. But this, Prop 58 193 includes this 1 million in other property. And like I said, that's a vacation home, but it could be a vacation home, but it could also be rental properties or small businesses, and that completely went away under 19, and that could be a real killer for people that are clinging to the middle class through rental properties or small family business, and it's just terrible what's happening. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, absolutely, no question about it. And people are waking up to it as they talk to their attorneys and accountants and do their planning. And again, it's a major concern. So I really hope we can do something about it.
Yeah. So now that you mention it, there are a couple of things we're trying to do, right? That opens up my next point of what are we trying to do, right? And so we have two projects that we're working on right now. One is SB 668 and one is ACA 9. So what was SB 668? SB 668 was simply a temporary fix. It was going to delay the implementation of the intergenerational transfer portion from February 16th of this year to February 16th, 2023. We got a hearing on that bill, and it unfortunately didn't go anywhere. The committee chair promised the author, Senator Patricia Bates from Orange County, that they were going to talk about the measure, that they were going to work on it because they realized that it was an issue, and then had a conversation, but didn't really go anywhere. And I think, me just speaking of what I think happened there was they knew that this was voting against something like that was politically unpopular, and so they didn't want to vote on it. So that was their solution. That's a bad thing because obviously the bill didn't go anywhere. But I think it's a good thing too that it tells us that there is a groundswell here, and they're hearing it, and they're concerned, and they know it's a problem, and they're scared to go against the will of the people on this. The other thing we're working on, though, I think the bigger picture is ACA 9. And that would simply restore 58 and 193 as they were written. It's a clean restore of 58 and 193. That so far has not been sent to a committee, but we're pressuring we're pressuring them to do that. And anyone who wants to know what the status of that is, we recommend you give a call to the Assembly Rules Committee and ask them why it hasn't been moved to a committee yet. We think that's important, and we think hearing from you will help move that along. And then I guess let's see, we're time. I think maybe we should. John, I see you flagging me here.
Yeah, I just a couple comments here, and Robert and Scott, feel free to chime in as well. I know, Robert, you said we were the only two groups that opposed it. I do know that the farmers were initially opposed to the proposal. It was ACA 11, but they were kind of given a kind of a bone, which they're now realizing wasn't much of a bone. So the farmers are still a little very suspect about the effectiveness of Prop 19 to protect their properties. I saw a comment from people saying, we're not trying to reverse 19, we're trying to reverse the tax increase of Prop 19. It's not the portability. Just for the record, we supported the realtors with Proposition 10 and that was a clean, if you will, portability provision that simply allowed people to take their Prop 13 base with them to any county. Regrettably, the political deal made by CAR involved this massive $1 billion tax increase by the elimination of the intergenerational transfer. I also saw a comment about the concern of the political strength of the realtors. I'm not sure. We've worked well with them in the past on a variety of issues. I think they were wrong on this issue, but I will say that a lot of the local chapters in Southern California were on our side in the opposition to Proposition 19. And the reason for that is many of the realtors had clients with income producing properties, not big apartment buildings, but mom and pop operations with maybe 2, 4 tenants, maybe a couple duplexes. And those people are hit pretty hard. And as Robert indicated, small business took a real hit on this. And one of the demographic groups that we're hearing from a lot is the small minority business owners. Think of your local Mexican restaurant in a strip mall. If they own the property, or if they own the property in which they conduct their business, and it's a family business, they're going to have the rug pulled out from underneath them at the point in time when they want to pass the property onto their children. Another question we sometimes get is if we proceed with ACA 9 and we're successful in getting that through the legislature and or a potential initiative, which we're considering as well, it would be fully retroactive. So the people who were caught unawares and are now very concerned about the effectiveness. Now, okay, is it too late? It's not too late. We can draft a constitutional change in any manner we want, so we can make it fully retroactive. So that is another question we often get.
Thank you, John. Well, I guess since you were answering some questions from folks out there in the interweb, Susan, why don't I bring you in, and why don't we answer some questions from folks? I see them popping up in my chat bar here, so I think there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of questions. Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Shelley. I'm the Vice President of Communications for the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and thank you all for being with us today. Gina asks, is there any way to block Senate Bill 539, which gives a blank check to execute Proposition 19 with all its holes? What's the story, Scott?
Well, Prop 19 is in effect regardless. So, I mean, what SB 539 does is it's a fix-it bill. It's one of which will probably be many fix-it bills. You know, it was supposed to, and once again, this kind of goes to the point of how we need more help, because it was that was supposed to be attached to the budget and passed before February 16th, because it's things that the BOE and the assessors have looked at and said, these are ambiguities in the law that we don't know how to properly implement. And so it's supposed to help them implement it better, but it was implemented anyways. You know, February 16th was the constitutional start of this. It's in effect. This just corrects some of the language. One of the things it does, which, you know, we've been monitoring that bill, and we sent a letter of concern about some of the language in it. And we got some fixes on it. One of the things was that Prop 19 as written is ambiguous on what happens if multiple children inherit the property, but only one moves in. And the BOE was interpreting the law as written as saying that the kids that didn't move in, that the house would be reassessed based on the kids that didn't move in. So if you got 4 kids, and only one moves in, it would be reassessed to 75% of it would be reassessed. And obviously that, you know, I think we all agree that probably was not the intent of the bill, or maybe it was, you know, but I hope it wasn't. And so that's one of the things that we got them to amend to make clear that if it's inherited by multiple children and one child moves in, it satisfies Prop 19. So, you know, obviously we don't want to necessarily give them credit for fixing what they broke in the first place, but I do think there are some things in SB 539 that are an improvement.
Okay, and Anita asks, can we preview the fix legislation? So how can they see ACA 9 to read the text of that?
ACA 9 is currently online on the legislative website. If you Google ACA 9, it will probably just pop up in your Google search. We also have links to it on our website, you know, Reinstate 58. You can check it out there. And I'm also happy to email it to you. My email address is scott@hjta.org. So feel free to email me and I can send it to you directly.
Okay, and Peter points out that it's not accurate to say that we're asking to reverse the tax increase in Prop 19. What we're doing is we're seeking to restore the intra-family exclusions from reassessment, which is absolutely true, but it's not as good on a bumper sticker. So just to be clear, I did want to acknowledge that question, but the effect of this tax increase, the effect of losing these exclusions for people who live in California and own property, which is accelerating in appreciation, the effect is it's a tax increase, and we mean to reverse it. So that's the reason for that. Marie asks, we have 5 siblings. How does it work if 5 siblings inherit a house?
Can you say that again, Susan? I missed it.
Marie asks, she has 5 siblings in her family. How does Prop 19's intergenerational transfer provision work if 5 siblings inherit a house? They don't all have to move into it, do they?
They did. You know, once again, that goes back to this fix in SB 539. The way it was being interpreted before, and SB 539 is not on the books yet, so it's not official. It's still being interpreted the old way for now. The way it was being interpreted is that, yes, if you have 5 siblings and only one moves in, the way the law was written is that it would be reassessed for the siblings that did not move in. They're trying to fix that, make that clear that if one child moves in, it satisfies the parameters of Prop 19, but that's not on the books yet. That bill is still in the Assembly, waiting to be passed out of the Assembly and then signed by the governor. So it's a problem, and we agree. There are many ambiguities in Prop 19. You know, this SB 539, we've talked to assessors, and they've described it as a 10% fix of what they think they need to fully and properly implement Prop 19. So I think we'll see a lot of more fix-it bills. These were just kind of top line things that they saw as the biggest red flags to properly implementing Prop 19.
And what was the bone that was thrown to the to the farmers? What did the legislature do for the farmers?
Yeah, I saw that. What was the bone that was given to the farmers? Well, it was a pretty big bone. The original language. So the way Prop 19 got to the ballot was kind of convoluted. It started as a initiative, a realtor-backed initiative. They were gathering signatures and doing all that, and it hit the threshold under California law. I think it's 25% of. If you hit 25% of signatures, you have to have a hearing in the legislature. They're typically informational, but it gives the legislature time to work with the proponents on this measure. And so they worked with the proponents on this measure, and it became ACA 11. And the farmers were not included in the original bill. It was just family homes. It said nothing about family farms. So the way it was written would lead us to believe that family farms, when transferred to the next generation, we're going to be reassessed to full market value. That's obviously horrible, and the farmers said that, and so they got an inclusion that says in ACA 11, the family home and the family farm. So the family farm is under similar rules that the family home is. Obviously still not great. That's why we're working on do it. We don't think that that's how it should be. We think they should just inherit it without seeing any, without any potential for reassessment. Keeping family farming is important in California. However, they've had some problems. Once again, the language is ambiguous, and they've had some problems with the implementation of that. And there was debates about how, what constitutes the family farm, and if the family farm isn't contiguous, meaning the parcels aren't all directly connected, are those non-contiguous parcels still considered the family farm? And the way it was being interpreted was no. And a lot of small family farmers, have a lot of non-contiguous parcels. They buy up parcels where they can get them. And so that was proving to be a real concern for family farmers. And once again, the farmers worked with the author of SB 539 and got some fix-it language in that would say that non-contiguous parcels also count as the family farm. So that's a good thing. But I still think overall Prop 19 is just as bad for family farms as it is for family homes for the same reason. And that's why we're working on do it.
Okay, and one final question. Pat Wright, who lost her mom on February 24th, our condolences. I'm sorry to hear that.
Sorry to hear that.
Has inherited a duplex bought in 1974. And this raises the issue of rental housing and affordable housing in California. That is going to be reassessed because that is income property. That counts as a business that is not eligible for an exclusion, although
Correct.
It would have been under Proposition 58. So
Correct.
if we are able to pass ACA 9 and call your lawmakers and urge them to support ACA 9, you know how to reach them. Find your rep at .legislature.ca.gov. Find your rep.legislature.ca.gov. Yes, on ACA 9. What happens if we are able to pass this? Will it be retroactive?
Yes, it will be retroactive, which isn't probably too helpful to folks now who are dealing with this right now, but it would be retroactive under the law. Obviously, this is a constitutional ACA 9 Prop 19 was a constitutional amendment, meaning no matter what we do, it has to go back to the voters. So, we can't get anything done until November of 2022, unfortunately, but it would be retroactive for folks. I know that's not something that folks want to hear, probably, they're dealing with this right now, that we have to wait for this relief until 2022, but it is retroactive. And, our hands are really tied on this because it is a constitutional amendment, but we're doing everything we can to get that relief as quickly as possible.
Okay. Okay, if you have further questions, please email them to us, info@hjta.org. Visit our website, hjta.org/reinstate58, and I'm going to send it back to John.
Thank you very much, Susan. I'm seeing a couple more comments here. One from our friend Jim Rooney. He is the county assessor up in Amador or Calaveras, one of the two. I think he's going to kill me if I get it wrong. I think it's Amador. He says, as a county assessor in a small county, I see longtime residents unable to stay in the area due to the loss of parent-child exclusions that were lost due to Prop 19 values. Values are being inflated by Bay Area transplants. So yeah, that's an additional problem created by this aspect of Proposition 19, is that its values are going up in California. And so you have small rural counties, you have the Bay Area folks with a lot of money coming in. And although people who stay in their home are protected under Prop 13, if they decide to give them to their kids, and if that's reassessed to full market value, they may be forced into a position where they have to sell. And that raises another important point. For families who have small apartment units, 4 units, 6 units, if they're forced to sell, this is going to have a direct impact on tenants, because if the apartment building is passed on from the parents to the child, or the grandparents to the grandchild, and it's reassessed to full market value, obviously the children are either going to have to raise rents substantially or sell the property to a large business, like large corporation like BlackRock or something like that. So again, this is, and I think this is why the Family Business Association is so concerned about this, is that it's devastating to small businesses. We have a comment from somebody who says that they're a realtor, and they were very much opposed to what the California Association of Realtors did. It's not the place of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association to intercede in a family fight within the realtor community, but we do know that they were not all singing off the same sheet of music during and after this campaign. So that has been kind of interesting to see. What can we do to bring political attention to repealing Prop 19? Well, we will continue to talk about it. But at this point, I believe Kevin Kiley, Assemblyman Kevin Kiley, who has been kind enough to carry the ACA 9 proposed constitutional amendment for us, I believe he is on the line. If I'm hoping the Zoom gods are good to us. Kevin, are you there? Are we not? I'm not hearing Kevin. Okay.
Kevin, you are muted and your camera is off, if you can hear us.
Okay. We're going to wait for a moment, Kevin. When you have a moment, when you get online, go ahead and feel free to speak up. But let's cover, let me make another point about our plans. What Scott talked about was the efforts to reverse this in the legislature. Everybody says, what chances do you stand going with a very progressive legislative body? And obviously Gavin Newsom is fairly progressive. The reality is, the trying to reinstate 58 is not a partisan issue. There have been a number of progressive politicians, including Malia Cohen, who is the very progressive African-American representative on the Board of Equalization from San Francisco. Very liberal credentials, but she makes a very, very valid point, and that is the ability to transfer real estate to your children or grandchildren is one of the few ways that minority communities have been able to build up intergenerational wealth. And we've heard that from many in the minority community, and this is not a partisan issue. So we think the political alignment is there. And 1986 was not that long ago when it was put on the ballot, but when Prop 58 was put on the ballot by unanimous vote of the California legislature. And if this were to appear on the ballot, I think there would be a lot of legislators who would hear a lot of noise from their constituents if they did not support it. So we are moving on the legislative track. Of course, we have not ruled out taking this issue back to the people directly via an initiative. As many of you know, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association has been in the past a major player in the initiative world. We did the iconic Proposition 13, which is known nationwide as the beginning of the modern tax revolt movement. We've done other tax initiatives, most notably Proposition 218, the Right to Vote on Taxes Act. We've been involved with other coalitions. We've been involved with Rob Rabinius and others in defeating Proposition 15. And so we have the capacity to take this to the voters. I would much rather the legislature deal with this in an honest and direct way, in a manner that was not spelled out to the voters when they were confronted by Proposition 19. So we've got the green light to begin the beginning steps of filing an initiative. We have the language based on ACA 9 already, and we're also starting coalition building. Again, the same coalition that is supporting the legislative constitutional amendment will be players should we decide to pull the trigger on an initiative. If we do qualify an initiative, we jump into that realm. We would have to use an initiative committee and build a coalition. It would appear on the ballot in the general election in November of 2022. But there is a lot that would have to happen between now and then in terms of the qualification, the signature gathering, and building up the campaign to make that happen. So we will keep everybody apprised. If you would support us in that effort, please let us know and join our coalition by going to our website. So with that, I'm going to check to see if Kevin's back on.
Kevin is ready. We were so pleased to have you, Assemblyman Kevin Kiley. John, would you like to introduce him?
Sure. We have our good friend Kevin Kiley, who is, my understanding is that he's a very busy man today. And thank you, Kevin, for making the time for us. I think we had about 1,000 signups for this webinar. And again, thank you for taking the lead on this very important issue of trying to reinstate Prop 58, protecting intergenerational transfers from reassessment of property. So again, thank you so much for joining us, Kevin.
No, thank you, and thanks for the chance to be with you and for the just vitally important work that Howard Jarvis does. You know, more so than ever. I mean, we have a state capital that is totally dominated by special interests that control the legislative process, and that leaves sort of the people as a whole relatively powerless. And so Howard Jarvis is one of the few organizations that really doesn't represent one interest or another, but represents taxpayers as a whole and provides that sort of source of focused and grassroots advocacy to do the things that are in the public interest as opposed to being for special interests. So with respect to the Assembly constitutional amendment that I've introduced, I think it actually, you know, the deal that you had with Prop 19 underscores a lot of what's really gone wrong with our state's politics. I mean, first and foremost, you can look at the perversion of the initiative process, which, of course, the initiative process was intended to be a way to get around politicians, to get around a corrupt political class, or if there was corruption going on, to allow the people to take matters into their own hands and to speak directly, which is, of course, how we got Prop 13 in the first place. But what we've seen in recent years is that politicians have figured out how to take over this process too and block that channel of change and use it for their own purposes through a variety of tools, most prominently, you know, how ballot language is written. This is something that John and I have spoken about a great deal. I think we even did like an op-ed together on the topic at some point, didn't we, John?
We did.
About how the AG has simply used the very short description of a proposition you see on your ballot as a form of political advocacy. So skewing the language in a poll-tested manner in order to lead to the outcome that is desired. And that's, in my opinion, total election fraud. I mean, it literally meets the definition of fraud if you look in the civil code, where you're, knowingly misleading someone and thereby causing them injury. And so, here you saw that to some extent in terms of how the operative provision that we're concerned about with intergenerational transfers was not prominent in terms of how the initiative was conveyed to the public. So I've actually introduced, in addition to this ACA Assembly Constitutional Amendment, I've repeatedly introduced a change that would put the power to write the language that appears on your ballot in the hands of not this partisan politician, the Attorney General, but in the hands of the nonpartisan legislative analyst. And I think that basically every editorial board in the state has endorsed this idea, even like the LA Times, the Sacramento Bee, as well as various good government groups, including the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And yet the legislature has never been willing to pass it. So that's number one. Number two, the second sort of fundamental problem with our state government that this whole deal highlights is, as I alluded to before, the influence of special interest groups, as this was a deal reached among the biggest players in Sacramento to put this on the ballot in this way in order to pass the initiative, in order to get the funding all on one side of the equation. And so the legislature, because the legislators are so sort of subservient to the interest groups behind this, easily passed the measure that actually put this on the ballot. This is something worth noting, is that they didn't go out and gather signatures for this. It was put directly on the ballot by the legislature. Actually, there were signatures gathering that went on, if I remember correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, John. But then they decided they'd messed it up, right?
They messed it up. There were drafting errors.
Right, exactly. So they're like, no problem. Well, we have the legislature that we control, so we'll just have them pass our preferred version and have that supplant the prior version. And so, of course, the legislature said, okay, yeah, no problem. We'll pass it. I was one of the only a few no votes, I think, when that came through. And of course, I voted against it on my own ballot. And I was very pleased when John presented to me this idea to try to restore the protection that was taken away. So that leads me to the third and final sort of perversion of our state's politics that this all highlights, which is, of course, the runaway spending and taxes, as most dramatically illustrated yesterday by Gavin Newsom signing a $267 billion budget, which, by the way, Jerry Brown just said was artificially pumped up. So, and he said we need to have a more frugal, sustainable, prudent way of doing business. That's Jerry Brown. It's not me. It's Jerry Brown. So you've really kind of gone off the deep end when Jerry Brown is saying stuff like that. And Prop 13 has, of course, been the one pillar of sanity in this unbelievable tax and spend environment, which, by the way, when you go from like a $100 billion budget to a $267 billion budget in a little over a decade, you'd think, wow, maybe that money must be getting away to the fantastic roads now, right? Or maybe we've done a lot to alleviate poverty and homelessness, or to make it more. No, none of that. All of these problems have just gotten worse despite the dramatic increases in spending. And so, but Prop 13 has been this one pillar of sanity, and we've really held the line on that. And I think this was the first time that a protection was taken away. And so I think that it's incredibly important that we say, no, this was not what the voters wanted. They were not aware of what was being done here. Prop 13 has always had broad bipartisan support, and we need to make sure that we don't allow this to become a precedent to continue chipping away at it.
Well, I think you're right. And as I said earlier, the coalition, this is not a conservative or liberal issue. We're hearing from people across the board, and including the minority communities who have been shut out of the access to be able to pass along intergenerational wealth. So that's it. Susan, are there any other questions, or do you think we can wrap up at this point?
I think we can wrap it up. If people have individual questions about personal situations, please email them to us and we'll do the best we can. You can also check with the Board of Equalization, boe.ca.gov, about the latest rulings and interpretations that might affect you. And please contact your legislators, contact your state representatives, urge them to support ACA 9. Findyourrep.legislature.ca.gov to look them up. John?
Thank you very much. And you can reach out to us at info@hjta.org. And all of us are also able to answer your questions individually. I'm at jon@hjta.org and Susan at hjta.org. And Scott, it's very simple. We keep things simple here in this organization. So I want to thank everybody for participating. Robert Ravinius with the Family Business Alliance of California, and Assemblyman Kevin Kiley for your support in this effort. I think we can get this done. Again, if it does not proceed in the California legislature, if they fail to see the light, we will make them feel the heat in other ways, and that includes the potential for proceeding with an initiative, which we are seriously considering at this point in time. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.
You.
Thank you.